if you had told me when I was doing The Godfather, this movie not only was going to be remembered, but was going to be considered good, I thought you nuts, because everyone hated it. Everyone hated what I was doing. So you never know what's going to happen. I'd like to ask you what your basic idea was in the adaptation you made of Miriam Toews' novel, Women Talking.
The novel, when I read it, just kind of went through me like a bullet. It was asking so many essential questions. And I just loved how big and philosophical and spiritual she managed to make this kind of intimate story about this community of women coming together to figure out how to remake their world together.
Girls in our colony had very little schooling. We hardly knew how to read or to write. But that day, we learned how to vote.
I didn't get when I first saw it how specific it was, and I took it more metaphorically. Then when I read a little bit about Miriam Toews, I knew she was a Mennonite. When I saw the movie, it was more to me like a big statement about our society today, everywhere in the world, in which women are still, in a way, being attacked and rather than revered. I wonder, I'd be interested to ask Sarah if the Miriam's novel did that, or that was a vision that you did when you began to think to adapt it.
We spoke about it from the beginning as a fable. So like, absolutely, that was the idea, that there would be a sense in which this was about all of us. This was about every patriarchal society, not just this small group of Mennonites. And that it felt to me like it lived in the world of metaphor in that way. I mean, I think Miriam does in the book ask those bigger questions. You know, she grew up Mennonite, and there is a sense of the specificity there. In film, we don't even say the word Mennonite, even though, you know, these events did happen in 2010 in this colony in Bolivia, and that is a real story that should be told and has been told in documentaries. For me, what was most important about us telling this story was that it echoed and resonated with so many of the conversations and things we're grappling with today.
Why does love, the absence of love, the end of love, the need for love, result in so much violence?
We talked a lot about wanting to give it the biggest possible canvas in terms of a sense of scope and a sense of momentousness, because I think they are talking about earth-shattering things that affect all of us, actually, regardless of gender. Like, they're taking on, you know, what does it mean to be true to your faith? What does it mean to get rid of the structures that have sprung up around your faith that are insidious and actually corrupting? What does it mean to move forward as a community, and how to move through those things with a group of people with whom you disagree on fundamental things in order to find a way forward and build another world? And so those did feel to me like massive questions that affect all of us, and really for me did exist in the realm of a fable, and the sort of earth-shattering quality and the bigness of a fable, I think, was really important in terms of not just being this intimate story sitting in a hayloft, you know, with women talking. Like, that's part of it. There's also this sense of the world they need to break and remake.
How can we address them?
The only important thing to establish is if we forgive the men, so that we will be allowed to enter the gates of heaven.
Well, there's beautiful emotion in some of the performance, very touching and moving. So I assume, Sarah, that the collaboration with your cast and all of your actors was touched on very, moving relationships and moments. What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, I was very important to me to create an incredibly nurturing, safe place where people felt like they could take risks. So it was, you know, because we were dealing with subject matter that affected a lot of people, not just cast, but also crew, many of whom had gone through abuse or assault in their life. It was really important, I felt, to create an environment where it was okay to take 10 minutes if you needed it. We would just stop. We also had an amazing on-set psychologist who worked with us. Her name is Dr. Lori Haskell, and she her sort of expertise is in trauma and what it does to the brain. And so that was an amazing resource for us to have in terms of preparing the characters, but also as a container on set. So if someone was having a hard time, and often that was crew, not cast, they could go to her and kind of talk that out. And she really helped us with sort of tools and strategies to work through those more difficult things that were coming up for people. Because of course, you know, even though we never show the assaults in the film, and I was really clear that wasn't something I was interested in seeing, these women do unearth a lot of stuff that was really resonant for a lot of people. There was a very big stated mandate that our experience on this film being good and healthy was more important, or as important as the final film itself. I mean, you're not always successful at that 100% of the time. I mean, as you know, when you get involved in making a film, there's an urgency that takes place. There's something that happens where there, becomes single focus. But as much as we could, we kind of battled that instinct to preference what we perceive to be a final product over the experience of making the film itself.
It is better than hatred of the familiar.
I think we're constantly engaged in a conversation of what's gone wrong, and that's useful and fruitful. But the idea of taking the conversation a step further, what do we want to build, not just what we want to destroy, and what does it look like for people of all genders to be working together, and what would we have to do to make that happen? I have a friend who studies the psychology of orangutans, and it's so interesting because she's looking at primates, and she was talking about how they achieve power within their communities. The way they achieve power is literally altruism. It's like, who is holding the branch open most for someone who, like, they literally kind of go around and kiss the babies, and that's how they achieve power. But it's like, it's not the mightiest, strongest, most dictatorial orangutan. She, in her description of it, it is about having to show how helpful you are in community. And so the idea that, our natural instincts are competitive and angry and aggressive, I just don't buy it.
We are friendly, we are kind, we help one another. And that's why we learn so much. Human civilization was like, over the 350,000 years, was more like your movie. It was egalitarian, practical councils and committees of men and women together, with women being a very strong, if not the leading part of it. The earth is a woman. The earth gives us everything. The earth is our mother. So of course women were revered in pre-ancient times because they're life givers. Who knows more about life than women? I was so touched when the actor who plays the scribe tells the one, the baby, he tries to express that he wants to be a family with her. She says something like, well, if I became a wife, then you wouldn't feel this way about me anymore. And of course, being a romantic, I just wanted them to be a little family because he wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not for everybody. I mean, I think that when Ona says that, she knows that who she is partly defined by the fact that she's not the kind of person who's ever going to get married, and that is what he is partly in love with, and that marriage would actually destroy that thing.
But you feel it. You love her so much. He loves her so much, and he can't have that, which is interesting to me.
And I love that he lets that go. Like, what I love about that character is he doesn't fight that. Like, his ego doesn't get in the way in that conversation. He kind of accepts the answer and is real use and help to this community of women instead of demanding something for himself.
We will be forced to leave the colony if we don't forgive the men. How will Lord, when he arrives, find the women if we aren't in the colony?
Jesus is able to return to life, live for thousands of years, and then drop down to earth from heaven to scoop up his supporters. Surely he'd also be able to locate a few women who left our colony.
Let's stay on track.
All right, I'll stay on track. I cannot forgive them. I will never forgive them.
COVID, oddly, as horrible as it is in general for our little film, it was beneficial in that everybody was sort of in one place. It was early in the pandemic, so we got like a week of rehearsal on Zoom to just kind of break down and analyze the text, and then a week in the finished set dressed space to actually block it out, which was an unusual amount of time. But I always I don't know about you, but I always kind of want to do that with a few months to digest it. Like, what I would ideally love is to be able to do that, have a month or two to digest and process what I learned, make shifts, and then shoot. Like, the rehearsal process going right into the shooting process always feels to me a little bit counterintuitive.
I have a rule when I rehearse is you must be in character. To be someone else for 6-7 hours is hard to do. It's a little strenuous. And I always treat the ensemble with having so much fun with theater games and improvs and stuff. But at the end of a few weeks, they start to change and they start to know the other characters in a very intimate way. And essentially, you end up with an ensemble that have become the characters together, and those relationships, both of the actor and the character, which start to be what's one and what's the other.
We must consider this.
No, that is not our responsibility because we aren't in charge of whether or not they are punished. We know that we've been attacked by men, not by ghosts or Satan, as we were led to believe for so long. We know that we've not imagined these attacks, that we were made unconscious with cow tranquilizer. We know that we are bruised and infected and pregnant and terrified and insane, and some of us are dead. We know that we must protect our children regardless of who is guilty.
All right, Salome, thank you. Please sit down.
So, Sarah, I have always been fascinated with your career. I first met you as an actress when you were really a young girl, and then I saw you evolve in the most wonderful ways. But now I know we haven't had a film for you for perhaps 10 years. What was the intervening time that took that delay, created it?
I think, first of all, for me, I don't want to make a film unless it feels incredibly urgent to me. So that means that, that might not happen that often. I think the biggest practical reason was, I have 3 small kids. I really wanted to be present for them. I was really deeply interested in being very present during their early years and ongoing. And the film, the way films are structured in terms of hours, are not conducive to being present as a parent. And I kind of think one of the things that I hope having more female filmmakers and filmmakers of other genders will do is to bring into the conversation this idea that we demand more time with our kids. Like we will not work these hours where it requires us to be completely absent from our kids. I think it's something that benefits men as well, but maybe there hasn't been the right conversation around it until now. So I didn't see a way that I could make a film when they were young. That for me was gave me the ability to imagine myself as a filmmaker again without abandoning my idea of the kind of parent that I wanted to be. And that was a huge impetus for me to come back. The more life I live in between films, the more I have to offer and the more I have to say, that I'm not in this sort of, I don't identify myself as a filmmaker. I identify myself in all these other ways. And so the making of a film brings all of that experience to it and does have this weight in my life that I actually really enjoy. So I think I'd like to make a film before 10 years from now. I don't need to make a film a year. I'm never in a hurry. And I'm curious to know from your point of view, because you've had, periods of time you've taken off and let things gestate. Like why is that for you? And what does that look like?
There's this prescribed idea that, well, that means you're a professional film director and you make a film every 2 years. There's a certain way you should behave. And I never behaved that way, nor am I interested in doing that. I did everything I wanted to do. Life is much more fun and much more an enjoyable, playful experience than modern life wants to put it in. It's, it's an industry. How much money did you make? You didn't make any money. You're going to lose money. It's not like that. That's false.
So I'm just curious to know, you're on Monday, 2 days from now, you start shooting Megalopolis. And by the way, thank you so much for taking the time to do this the weekend before production. I hope to be that generous one day. So I'm wondering, though, you've been thinking about this film for so many decades, and now you're going in and making it. And I'm just wondering how you're feeling about it and what it's been like to gestate a project for this long and to be finally moving into making it.
The reason it took so long is because if you look at my films, the first thing you'll notice, every film I made was totally a different style of the previous one. I like to make movies I don't know how to make. If you listen very carefully, the movie starts telling you how to make it. And that's a thrill. The movie says, do more of that. But it says it in a very quiet voice. So if you're sure you know how to do it, you won't even hear it. Because I always put the writer above the title out of respect for what the writer does. So now I have a movie that I really wrote my way of rewriting it 1 billion times. And I think what it's about is more clear than it was when it started. Basically it's a love story. So I know that if I make the love story work, and it's about a woman between 2 men, like War and Pieces, and the woman is torn between she's going to be either loyal to her father, who educated her and gave her her values, whom she loves, or she's going to be loyal to this wizard guy who she feels is the solution. And she's in that position of having loyalty to these two different poles of her life, and the themes that they represent. One wants to leap into the future unafraid, and the other says, no, we have to be careful and build society that's not going to fall apart. So in the course of hopefully having a good love story, if you look further and see the film again, you'll find that there's more in it, I hope. And over the years, more and more and more.
I love what you said about feeling lost being a good sign, because I feel like I used to just think if I don't know exactly what I'm doing, that's not a good thing. And then making my documentary 10 years ago really taught me that feeling of wandering in the wilderness and not having a model and not knowing what you're doing is actually a great sign. I'm trying to like take that feeling of being lost and welcome it instead of fighting it. And so I'm just so curious to hear you say that's something you feel too at this stage.
I like to not know how to make the movie, because then I know the movie's going to help me.
And I love the idea that it's about this quiet listening, because I feel like that's the opposite of the way we talk about and think about, you know, great filmmakers, that it's all about this bombastic yelling of a single vision that's uncollaborative and knows what it is. And I love the idea that actually the quiet listening is where the power lies. And I just think we need to talk about that more, because I think people model themselves on this dictatorial image of what a filmmaker is.
You know, the most important thing of movies, in my opinion, is the writing and the acting. And it's amazing how many directors don't know a lot about acting. There are more actors who become fine directors statistically than any other occupation, because they understand acting, and acting is essential to come alive working with actors.
I remember this thing you said to me like 20 years ago when I actually met with you about Megalopolis when I was 20. And I remember you said this thing where you didn't have the budget you wanted for it. And I said, I can't believe you can't get exactly the amount of money that you want to make this film. And you said, no, those limitations are good. All my best creative decisions have come from limitations. And it stuck with me through this entire film, because there were a bunch of things where, you know, it just wasn't the right thing. And I couldn't get exactly what I had asked for. And I took that as a sign that I was going to have my best creative ideas instead of being a frustrated toddler. And it was just such a huge help in terms of moving forward on a film, of just thinking of the obstacles and limitations as opportunities to have good creative ideas.
Well, if what you're working on is alive, I mean, the process of working with your colleagues and your technicians and your actors, that's a process in which it has some life. As long as it has life, then it's going to be something worthwhile.
If you at 83 now could talk to yourself as 43, what would you tell yourself?
So I always thought I was just a sweet, affectionate kid. I never did good in school, but then my life took a very strange turn when I became so famous because of The Godfather. I mean, it was an accident. And now what I've learned, I guess, is that, you know, don't worry about your capabilities. Everyone gets a capability, and just do it and play with each other, be good to people, have fun. I'm never going to say, oh, I wish I had done this. I wish I had done that. I'm going to say, oh, I got to do this, and I got to see my daughter win an Oscar, and I got to own a movie studio, and I got to lose it. And I got all these wonderful things that I got to do.
Can I ask you a question with Megalopolis, because this is a film you've been dreaming about for decades? Are the stakes higher for you? Are you more nervous, or do you feel more comfortable because you've thought about it for so long?
Well, I wish I were more nervous, because when you're nervous, I think that's a good sign, because it shows how committed you are to give everything. So when I'm nervous, I say good, because that means I'm going to go all the way. So the fact that I'm not entirely nervous as I wish I were, it worries me. It's like, why am I not? I should be more nervous. Why am I not more nervous? And I don't know why. If you had told me when I was doing The Godfather, this movie not only was going to be remembered, but was going to be considered good, I thought you nuts, because everyone hated it. Everyone hated what I was doing. So you never know what's going to happen.
How do you roll through those moments where it does seem disastrous? Because I've certainly had that moment on anything I've made. There's a moment where it's the worst film that's ever been made. And so
well,
how do you
well,
roll through those moments gracefully?
Well, I had a rule all my career that if I was going to be away for more than 10 days, I took my kids out of school and brought them with me because at least I could have my kids, which I have so much fun with. Of course, my wife said, that's fine for the kids, but what am I going to do? And I said, well, you can make a documentary, because she was a very good camera person. So it was ironic. And when on Apocalypse, I would go home to my wife and say, this movie is the worst movie ever made. I'm going to get an F. People are going to laugh at me. This is going to be horrible, hoping that she was going to say, oh, no, dear, I have faith in you. It's going to be good. You'll see. Instead, she said, oh, would you put the microphone on and say that again? So if you look at her film, Hearts of Darkness, it's me just saying how horrible it is, hoping she was going to say, I believe in you or something like that, but I never got it.
Thank you
Okay.
so much for doing this right before you go into production. It means so much to me, and I can't wait to see Megalopolis.
Well, Sarah, any opportunity I have to spend a little more time with you, no matter when it is I look forward to it. So thank you for the conversation. It's so nice to see your beautiful film and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.